I started really in like 1971. The old Metropolitan Opera in New York was closing, and the new one had been built in Lincoln Center, and we sort of realized it was the last season of the old Met, and we weren't really into opera. We were into classical music and theater and musicals and movies and all that kind of stuff. But we said to each other, well, we better go to the old Met and see some operas just because it's about to end. So we went, and we were immediately bitten. We immediately realized that this was for us. We loved the operas, we loved the singers, we loved the conductors. We didn't like the productions. We knew right away that this was an incredible art form full of brilliant, talented people, but that some major aspect of it was missing. We didn't know what to do exactly, how to fix it, but we knew that it needed serious attention from a theatrical point of view. My brother and I went to the Met as standees 3 or 4 times a week, easily, for many, many years. We were, even when we went to school, and we went to school in another city, we would travel back and forth to the Met and to see 3 or 4 or 5 performances a week. My brother and I knew from the age of about 15 or 16 that we were going to do opera. We were going to be opera directors. Went through 4 years of university together, and we all sort of already were scheming and talking about opera and the opera world and what was good and what was bad. In the 70s, there started to appear all through America, more regional companies. The Houston Opera, the Detroit Opera. I mean, dozens of companies started and that. Then I started to visit Europe, but probably most importantly Germany in the mid-70s, to see what was going on here, and which was quite a revelation for me, because I started to see the real sort of the new approaches to opera that were happening on the continent. That modern artists, designers, painters, theater directors, film directors, and a whole slew of people were being pulled into opera and changing opera really, and making it much more experimental and theatrically much more vivid and exciting and charged and dangerous even. I was very lucky to meet in the 70s David Pountney, who was a very famous, powerful British opera director. Well, at the ENO during the so-called powerhouse years, I did a series of Verdi productions, Ballo and Mascara, and then Simone Boccanegra, 2 shows that were really sort of a revolution and a kind of revelation for the British audience about Verdi, which had been treated in the past in a somewhat more traditional, kind of, and I treated these Verdi dramas in a much more kind of charged up, abstracted, dreamy, and kind of I attacked them on some levels, and I think I brought out a lot of the energy and the passion and the darkness and the danger which was always there. I also did one of the early Handel productions at the ENO. I did Ariodante, which was another one of Handel's great masterpieces, which was virtually unknown in the able. It's a good earner, but more than that, it was one of the great, I think, I mean, I don't want to blow my horn too much, but it was one of the great things that changed people's idea about Handel artists.
What about your Wagners?
Well, I have now done everything by Wagner. I just did The Flying Dutchman in Santa Fe Opera just this past summer, and now I've done the 10. Peter Jonas left the ENO, that he went then and took over the Bayerische Staatsoper, the Bavarian State Opera in Munich, which is one of the top theaters in the German-speaking world there, and I became really the main director there. I did, I think, 15 different productions. Company. I've always been happier in actually the smaller places where there's more of a kind of a family atmosphere, where you feel you're not part of a giant factory, a giant machine, but you feel a little bit more like every show is very important on its own, and you have a little more time on stage, you have a little more rehearsal time, you get a closer relationship with the chorus. I mean, there are obviously big changes going on in the opera world. It's not only the COVID thing. There's been a rebooting going on all over the place in entertainment. Opera is in a really transitional period now. I mean, we had this whole era in Europe where where the whole idea of régie, that is specific direction, stage direction, modern directors attacking and confronting and hopefully bringing to blossom a lot of these old pieces. That was a whole era which is sort of happened, I think. So and that people are waiting, people are looking around for the next point for opera, the next identity for opera, the next raison d'etre of opera, as opera is now being used as a way to confront racism, to confront diversity issues in the world, to confront the Me Too movement, confront women's place in society. I mean, opera is now being used in some ways as a tool for social change. At the Met, for example, nowadays, I mean, you can go to see La Bohème, which used to be an absolute bestseller, always, without a question. You can go to the Met now and see that, and it's 35% sold. It is. And I think Peter Gelb has hit upon a new image for the Met. He's started to commission a lot of new operas. I mean, in the past, 20 or 30 years would go by at the Metropolitan Opera, and they would not do a world premiere. It was famous. Nowadays, Peter Gelb is saying, this is the new identity for the Met. This is what's going to bring audiences in. This is what's going to make opera hot and exciting again, and it's going to fill up our theater. It's image.
And how do the finances of that work? Are these tickets for the new operas, are they at the same kind of price point as Don Carlo?
I think the pricing is somewhat different, but nonetheless, I think that he's had fantastic success with several of these world premieres in the last couple of years. The question is, yes, they seem to be really successful in the first season. They're selling very well. The question is, will people come back for the second season or the third time or the fourth time? I mean, people come back for hundreds of years to see, Verdi and Puccini and Wagner and all that, and Mozart. The question is there really a future in this? Or is this a sort of exciting, hot thing of the moment?
And then people say that you can go to the cinema and experience and get 80% of the experience for 20% of the price.
If that, yeah, exactly. I mean, this is the big question about the streaming and the success of the streaming from the Met, which has then really traveled through the world. Is this availability in movie theaters all over the place? Is this losing the live audience for him? That it is. That what's happening in England? The great companies that have built up in England over the last decades, the English National Opera, the Opera North, the Welsh Opera, the Scottish Opera, are all facing problems and troubles now. And obviously the big thing that's happened in opera in the last years is the country house opera boom. They have become now major players in the ecology of opera in the UK, and a lot of the best singers, young singers, British singers, directors, designers are now really starting to be almost sustained by these companies.
What do you think Grange Park Opera should be doing in the future, looking ahead 5 years, 10 years?
Well, I think Grange Park Opera is doing what it should be doing. That is producing very high quality opera productions to a high standard in a reasonably small, intimate theater, which is very different. It's a very different opera experience from going to the Coliseum for the ENO or the Royal Opera House for. I don't know. I don't see any problem I mean, the thing is, I'm from an era where we wanted to do the whole operas. We started, I mean, for example, Lucia, when Lucia was brought back, the pieces were presented quite cut in the 50s and the 60s. And I'm from the era, from the 70s on, where you looked at these operas and you said, wait a minute, why are there all these cuts? Let's do the whole thing. It's brilliant. It's not too long. It's long, but it's not too long. And the operas are better when you see the whole thing. Why not see the whole thing? Why go home an hour earlier and watch the news and then go to bed? I mean, What's the big deal? I think people are already contemplating that, I have to say. It doesn't happen yet in opera, really, but I'm sure that in the next 20 years, people's tastes are changing, people's different. I mean, people are already questioning the fact that a woman has to die at the end of 99% of the operas that were ever written. Younger people are not so interested in telling the same old stories, sort of in the same old way anymore, with the same old resonances of sort of the patriarchy and, you know, subjugation of women and blah blah blah. I see it coming. I see it coming within 20 years, no question. I have no question that people are going to start to shorten pieces to a degree, start to make cuts, and they're going to start to. There might even be the beginnings of mashup between an opera, a famous old opera, and new things being put into it. I just see something on the horizon. I'm not going to be a part of it. It's not really my job. It's for the next generations to continue these things and somehow make sense out of them for themselves. That's it.